larger organization. There are chapters all over the country, and here in Southern Nevada, we have several. There's also one up in Reno and other parts of Nevada. So the Southern Nevada chapter is Red Rock Audubon Society, and I am happy to serve as the education coordinator for the local chapter. And I'll start by telling you a little bit about myself and how I ended up in this position, how I ended up in this area, and then we'll take a deep dive into some of the ecology of the places that we go climbing at and some of the hiking areas that we go to as well. So this is going to be very Southern Nevada-centric because of, well, this is where I've taken the most photos and seen most of the species that we're going to see here. But there's going to be something for everybody, no matter where in the state that you are. I made sure to include birds that people up in northern Nevada or Great Basin National Park might be familiar with as well. So there's something in it for everybody. Okay, here we go.
I hate to interrupt you, but
as we'll discuss on this program. And so it makes sense that by conserving birds, we're kind of conserving wilderness and land as well. So it makes sense as well that this partnership would happen between Red Rock Audubon Society and Friends of Nevada Wilderness. And here's the Friends of Nevada Wilderness mission statement. So a lot of overlap there, a lot of emphasis on wild lands. Red Rock Audubon emphasizes birding and birding education in urban areas. And Friends of Nevada Wilderness emphasizes that work in wilderness areas. However, there is a lot of overlap between ecology and what we can do here as an organization with Red Rock Audubon is we can teach people how to enjoy birds so that when you go back out into those climbing areas or you go hiking, you know a little bit more what to look for and you can enjoy it a little bit more. So what you learn with us, with Red Rock Audubon Society, here in urban areas are evergreen when you head out into other places in the world. How to get started? I got started really early. This is me when I was like 1 or 2 years old over in South Florida where I grew up. So I've always been into birds. Studying up on my Peregrine Falcons. So Peregrine Falcons are all over Nevada, and we'll cover those birds a little bit today. So I was into them even from an early age. So I left South Florida, I studied environmental science, and I ended up hitting the road after college. I was thinking about going and studying ecology as a master's student, and well, ADHD kicked in and like, nah man, you're hitting the road. So I hit the road after college, and I did a couple seasons in the Rockies and the southwestern part of the United States, all of the deserts, the Sonoran, the Chihuahuan, the Mojave, and the Great Basin. So here's me conducting point counts in Colorado. That's just a really easy way to census bird species. Kind of lived the bumming life around the country, living out of a Jeep for a little bit, which was really exciting. I got to spend 3 seasons doing point counts, living in national forests, living in national parks, just driving around, living in a Jeep, jumping in rivers to go bathe, and it was an awesome time. But it eventually led me back to Florida where I grew up, and I got involved with really trying to understand hawk and falcon migration a lot more. So I worked in the Florida Keys doing some hawk research, monitoring hawks as they move south through South Florida, down the Florida Keys, and towards Mexico and Cuba. So I got involved with that for a little bit. I ended up having the opportunity to work down in Brazil and explore South America for a couple months, for a couple years. Saw some spectacular animals down there. And another passion of mine is Alaska. I do spend a little bit of time up in Alaska, especially in the summertime. And so pretty spectacular birds over there. But it all led me back here to Nevada because I had this opportunity to get involved with Red Rock Audubon Society. And I just love how much wilderness area we have here in Nevada, all over. If you drive out of Las Vegas in any direction, you hit public land pretty fast. And all those areas are just fantastic places to go look for birds. So just about all of the state is covered in desert. We have 4 North American deserts, and 2 of them can be found here in this state. In the southern part, we have the very hot and dry Mojave Desert, and the rest of the state is Great Basin Desert. So that's going to be a lot colder, a little bit more precipitation, especially in the form of snow. And for For those up in Reno, you're obviously closer to the Great Basin Desert. Deserts are defined as regions that have 10 inches or less of annual rainfall. So we are certainly in a desert here in the Mojave with 4 to 5 inches in the Las Vegas Valley per year. This is going to be an important slide to remember, because what I'm trying to illustrate here is the north-south orientation of a lot of the mountain ranges that we have in the state. We have quite a number here in Nevada. I can't remember the exact number of mountain ranges, but notice that they're oriented north-south, and that'll be important in, I don't know, 20 slides or so. We'll breeze through some of those. I created this to sort of illustrate some of our vegetation zones here in southern Nevada, and probably very similar in other parts of the state, except that maybe you might be swapping out the creosote that we have here in the Mojave Desert. Maybe you're going to get some sagebrush at your low elevations in the Great Basin Desert. Move up in elevation, you're going to come up into different tree communities. And so, you know, here in southern Nevada, we have our creosote, we have our Joshua tree as you get a little higher in elevation, 3,000 to 5,500 feet or so. Then you get into your pinyon juniper woodlands. And that's where a lot of the climbing areas in southern Nevada are. It's in this pinyon juniper woodland habitat, as well as some montane habitat as you go up into the Spring Mountains in Mount Charleston. And then finally, once you get up over here, you run out of things to climb because now you're at the peak of a mountain. I then went ahead and put in some different icons for the different plant communities. And as we sort of move throughout this presentation, we're going to be moving from low elevation and gradually climbing as if you're heading out on your morning trip. You're heading out to the wall in the morning, and you're leaving the Las Vegas Valley, and you start to go through these different vegetation zones. As you start to get to your climbing zones in, say, Red Rock Conservation Area in the Spring Mountains, now you're in that pinyon juniper habitat. So that's where we're going to spend a lot of time kind of stopping on some birds. Okay, you're heading out for the morning. And 2 birds to be pretty familiar with. You can find these here in the city of Las Vegas pretty often. I saw the bird on the right today at a busy intersection, and Peregrine Falcon. Look at those feet over here on the left-hand side of the screen. This is a Peregrine Falcon. We also have a number of those in town because they like to eat the pigeons that, well, we have a ton of pigeons, so we have a couple Peregrine Falcons in Las Vegas. Some common songbirds. This is a sagebrush sparrow on the left, and then black-throated sparrows on the center and the right-hand side. You'll see these at your low elevation, usually as you're starting out. And the black-throated sparrows, so the bird in the center and the right, they're going to start singing pretty soon here. We're getting close to springtime for some of the birds in the low elevations, so they'll be out there singing. And one of the telltale signs that they're starting to feed is that they're holding this food material here. You can see this sparrow has insects in its mouth, so it's going off to a nest to go deliver that to a mate or young on the nest. 2 really feisty animals right here. Got a great horned owl on the left, and on the an Anna's hummingbird on the right-hand side. So they're both kind of fierce animals. The hummingbird, of course, is a little bit smaller, but its temperament is still that of a great horned owl, I think. And the great horned owl is kind of the ruler of the nighttime in a lot of your climbing areas. They actually will sometimes find nests on cliff faces, especially old raven or hawk nests. Those great horned owls will move in and take some of those nests over. They don't create their own nests. And then your Anna's hummingbird on the right-hand side, well, they're all over southern Nevada, and they're actually increasing their populations throughout the state because of the amount of ornamental trees that people have been planting over the years across the state, and they're expanding northward, especially as climate change continues to change the overall conditions over time. That allows for the vegetation that they like to also persevere and expand. So they're just following the habitat with climate change. This is all you get. That's a ruby-crowned kinglet. That's a rendition of what a real-life sighting is like of a ruby-crowned kinglet. It's just a flash, so that's all you get on that one. All right, moving on up. Gaining some elevation. Maybe you're in some Joshua Tree woodlands and you're seeing some mountain bluebirds. The male on the left is blue, and the female is on the right, and she's brown. So it's not uncommon for a lot of birds to have that sexual dimorphism, so to see differences between the male and the female. And this makes a lot of sense, especially when you think about the fact that a female bird has to sit on a nest. That nest is usually going to be brown, so she needs to blend into that nest in order to make sure that they're not discovered by predators. And this is our state bird, the mountain bluebird. Cool. Okay, so I think this is everyone's favorite bird if you're climbing long enough. On the left-hand side, this is the canyon wren. And then it has another bird that's very similar on the right-hand side. That's a rock wren. And these are two very frequently seen birds in all climbing areas across kind of the Southwest. I think a lot of people might be familiar with these birds, especially the song of the canyon wren. That's a very familiar song. I'm not sure if we'll be able to play it here.
I can play it.
Oh, yeah? Oh, let's play the song of the canyon wren. Not sure if we'll be able to play it here.
I can play it.
Oh, yeah? Oh, let's play the song of the canyon wren. Not sure if we'll be able to play it here.
I can play it.
Oh, yeah? Oh, let's play the song of the canyon wren. Not sure if we'll be able to play it here. It's all right, I can. Oh, yeah? Oh, let's play the song of the canyon wren. Not sure if we'll be able to play it here. It's all right, I can. Oh, yeah? Oh, let's play the song of the canyon. Not sure if
That's okay.
yeah, the canyon wren, I'll go back to it real quick. What I want to point out about this really cool bird, it's found all along the Colorado River. It's found at Red Rock Canyon. It's a very familiar bird to anyone who's rafted through the Grand Canyon or the Green River up in Utah. I mean, these birds are just living truly life in a vertical realm, and they will almost always be on that 4th or 5th class terrain. And the way that they have adapted to living on cliff faces and vertical areas is by having a really long bill for a wren and a flat head so that they can actually stick their heads into little cracks on the walls to go pick out insects and spiders. Even in the wintertime, this little bird can figure out how to live in really cold environments up in Mount Charleston. So I know a lot of people are really about the canyon wren, and you can head over to the places I just mentioned, head down the Colorado River, and these birds will be singing probably every week now. We kind of all know this bird. This is a common raven. We do not have crows here in Las Vegas. I don't know if a lot of people knew that, but if you see a dark bird and it's not a grackle, so those are the ones that make the crazy noises in parking lots with the yellow eyes, if you see a large dark bird and it looks like a raven or a crow, it's probably a raven here in southern Nevada, but that's not the case in the northern part of the state. You'll see these birds any elevation. You'll see them at the tops of mountains. You'll see them as you're driving through Southern California and going to Prim, and you're passing through Prim just along the interstate. Those birds are doing really well. It's one of the only birds that seems to be expanding throughout a lot of the desert areas, and that is because they have learned to follow highways and linger around highways and nest in poles that run throughout the desert. So they'll be on lines and telephone poles. We're creating a lot of habitat and giving them tons of opportunities to make a living, and this is just one of those birds that has increased its population as humans have increased and moved into other parts of the desert. Their populations have gone up. Most other birds, that's not really the case. Probably a lot more familiar with the bird on the left-hand side. If you have been to Red Rock Canyon or up in the Spring Mountains, this is a Woodhouse's scrub jay. If you're in Reno, you have a different population of scrub jays in that area. You'll have the California scrub jay because of the contact of the Sierra Nevada range that comes into that part of the state. Here in the Mojave Desert and other parts of the Great Basin, usually you have the Woodhouse's scrub jay. The bird on the right is a gray vireo. It is dependent on that pinyon juniper habitat that I mentioned. And that pinyon juniper habitat is the predominant plant community that you get in places like Red Rock Canyon and throughout a lot of the spring mountains. It's not an easy bird to see. Usually you can hear them in the spring and the summer if you know what they sound like. I decided to place it in here because it's a bird that its population is decreasing quite quickly. So a lot of people have some interest in this bird and its well-being right now. If you've ever been walking through a wash or up a canyon anywhere in Nevada and you heard a lot of rustling on the ground and you tried to figure out where that rustling was coming from within a bush, chances are it was this thing. They're really noisy birds. They're really common birds, and they will be all throughout a lot of these habitats and plant communities that I've been mentioning. Kind of get them anywhere in a climbing area or hiking area in the state. And actually, I saw one of these birds today, just in the neighborhood of Winchester, kind of in the middle of the city, just running around. Got pretty excited about that. I'm not really much of a climber. I have climbing gear. I have climbed, but I had a buddy named David Anderson give some of his photos, and David's actually here in the audience, so he donated some of these amazing photos from, I assume, Red Rock Canyon, mostly or exclusively. Yeah, Peregrine Falcon. So much respect for this bird. This is the fastest bird in the world. They've been clocked when they're diving at over 200 miles an hour. I've heard a couple different figures. So this is as they're diving, they're tucking in their wings, and they kind of turn themselves into a bullet. And of course, they'll kind of propel themselves forward with these really powerful flaps to kind of get them going. But eventually, as they continue to drop towards Earth, gravity kind of does about as much as it can do, and they've done about as much as they can do. And together, those forces help move these birds really quickly towards Earth. And when they're doing that, they're typically trying to catch another bird, usually out of the air. Falcons are mostly bird eaters, and the way that they catch things in the air is sometimes by just grabbing them, but peregrine falcons will also punch. They'll also kind of hold their talons into a fish shape, and they'll punch something out of the sky. So these birds will come out of nowhere at 200 miles an hour and kill something on impact. And I've seen that on occasions, including in the spring mountains. Two photos here of a very familiar species. This is your red-tailed hawk. You can see the red tail in both of these illustrations. Most of the time, red-tailed hawks have a red tail. That's not always the case, especially when they're young. It can be a mottled brown or gray coloration. The same red-tailed hawk that was on the left-hand side, it happened to fly by a young bald eagle. So this is a bald eagle. And you might be thinking, aren't bald eagles, don't they have white heads and white tails and dark bodies? Well, for the first 5 years of their lives, they're actually various amounts of mottled brown with a little bit of white coming in. So this is a young bird, and it'll get that white head, that white tail, and dark body, that iconic bald eagle look at about 5 years of age. And you can see here how much bigger it is than a red-tailed hawk. A red-tailed hawk is a very big hawk. So eagles are on a whole other level. I don't really think that you'll see a bald eagle at most climbing areas. It's actually a bird that feeds mostly on fish. So Pyramid Lake or Pranigat, even Lake Mead here in southern Nevada, those are places to see the bald eagle. Okay, we're still going uphill. Remember, we started kind of at 2,000 feet in elevation, and we're going up into these different plant communities. We've seen some of the birds that you find at the very beginning of your climb, but let's say you just keep climbing and climbing and climbing, and now you've ended up in your montane habitat. And you start to see species that you would expect to find when you're in ponderosa pine forest with white fir, stands of aspens, and bristlecone pine. And you'll start to see that bristlecone pine as you start to get a little bit higher. but that's a really widespread plant in the Great Basin and Mojave deserts, especially when you get very high up in elevation, that bristlecone pine. We have two species here that are related to ravens and crows, and these are types of corvids. And the corvids are a very smart group of birds. It's a family of birds you can find on all the continents, I believe, except for Antarctica. And there's a lot going on in their minds. They're quite smart. They have the ability to learn very quickly. They figure out where the food is very fast, and they know when you're not paying attention, so they can come in and kind of take something from you if they're accustomed, of course, to feeding on things. And in a lot of our climbing areas, a lot of the animals are accustomed to feeding on things because, well, people feed them, and these animals learn. So on the left-hand side, you have a Clark's Nutcracker. That is a bird found throughout the state, as well as the Steller's jay. You can find these in mountainous areas throughout the state as well. Okay, yeah, there you have it. You know, starting from the bottom, heading uphill, reaching your climbing areas, and of course, you kept going, and now you're at the very top. Stubborn clicker. What's that?
The battery might be going on.
All right. So remember when I said that it's going to be important to remember that the mountain ranges throughout the state are oriented north-south? Well, this is particularly important to migratory birds, because if you can remember way back when you first heard about how birds migrate, you might recall that they generally go north-south. That's not completely true for all species, but in general, you can assume that birds are going to be heading north to south, depending on the time of the year. So in the fall, you would expect birds to be migrating south. And these birds don't necessarily, most birds in our state, they don't really want to spend time in the really open, arid, creosote deserts of the Mojave, or in the big sweeping sagebrush seas of the Great Basin Desert to the north of us right now. They want to be able to go to areas that have lots of cover and lots of trees. And usually that means that they're going into different mountains. So if you remembered that map from way back when in the slide, the way distant past, you'll remember that a lot of those mountains are spaced out throughout the state. And so imagine these birds, like the peregrine falcon and the red-tailed hawk, these birds are migrating south along those ranges that are north-south. So they are following them and hopping, I like to think, across from one mountain range to the next as if they're islands. They're not really spending time in between. They want to go from one mountainous island to the next one. So it is critical here in the state that we have all of these different types of mountain ranges oriented the way that they are, so that these birds can make it from place to place, knowing that there isn't a lot of cover and not a lot of water in those inner mountain valleys in between. This is a bird that you might know from if you've been on a wall, you're a climber, and you're in an area with canyons on both sides. This is a bird that might get your attention. It's a white-throated swift. It's a bird that flies usually on really high up in the air and catches insects. That's all it does. Fly around in circles and catch insects over a big area. It'll go up into hundreds or thousands of feet high in elevation to go climb up into high elevations and altitudes to catch insects. And they nest in cracks in cliffy areas. So a lot of climbers might know these birds, especially when you're up on the wall. I'm sure they've gotten your attention when they come by at a really fast speed. And they also have a really distinctive call. They have a sort of a shriek or a scream. So that'll also get your attention too. They don't really sound like what you'd expect them to sound like. This is an awful photo. This is a northern goshawk. It's shot from a distance with my camera. and really grainy because I zoomed all the way in, but sometimes that's the best photo you get of this species. This is a northern goshawk, and it resembles a peregrine falcon, but this is a true forest hawk. And I know that some climbers have had issues with peregrine falcons making a commotion around them when they're getting too close to a nest. When that happens, if a bird seems really excited about your presence and seems to be circling you and looking at you and making a bunch of crazy noises, probably close to a nest. And some of these birds do nest on cliffs. Not this guy, though. You can find them at the high elevations. But the reason that I included it is because unlike the peregrine falcon, this bird actually will attack you, and it will actually try to rip your face off. They're pretty aggressive bird. So I know of some people that have been cornered by these birds getting too close to a nest, and the bird was just flying around a tree trying to get them, and they had to hide behind the tree, making sure that it wasn't too close to them. And I've gotten close to their nest a couple times. Fortunately, you're not likely to run into it while you're climbing, and that's a very good thing. Just kind of take this in, especially that right-hand side, all those ribbons of red there on the map. Those are those mountain ranges. And again, those are so critical for our bird species. And there's a place in the northern part of the state, or the northeastern part of the state, where every fall, biologists head up to spend a couple weeks monitoring the hawks and falcons as they're migrating south. And so they're positioning themselves up at a vantage point at a very high place and watching these birds come in from the north, past them, and continue on south. So there are a couple places that you can do that across the west. And the Goshawks, it's called the Goshawks Hawk Watch. You can go up there in the fall. This is, again, the northeastern part of the state. You park in the pinyon juniper communities, so a couple thousand feet in elevation, and then you get to hike a couple miles up to about 9,000 feet until you get to the Hawk Watch location. And now you get to watch some of these birds that I've shown you photos of. You get to watch as they come right by you. And some of the things that some of the biologists have permits to do at that location is actually catch those birds and band them, weigh them, take measurements as part of a long-term research project. So that's pretty cool that we have that somewhere in the state, a really remote Hawk Watch location. Speaking of locations, if you're here in southern Nevada, I generated this little map for you to take a look at. We've got some of the bird watching locations or great places in the southern part of the state to go birding. Again, you know, most of the people in the state live here and are not in wilderness areas. However, birds are everywhere. So, you know, Red Rock Audubon Society, we invite everyone out to come birding with us, and we want to show you some of the birds that we have in this area. We're right about here, very close to Clark County Wetlands. The Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve is 5 or 10 minutes away from this climbing gym that we're presenting at today. Cornerstone Park is about 10 minutes from here. All of these are fantastic places to go, and Red Rock Audubon Society goes to these places pretty regularly. And what you learn when even if you're birding in your own backyard or in the city of Reno or Las Vegas, whatever you're learning, you can take that into a wilderness area. You can take that into a climbing area. All of those little tidbits of information, whatever you learn along the way, that's evergreen no matter where you go. So we can definitely get you out there and teach you some of those skills. This is just a quick, doesn't look too great for most of the people in the audience, but this is our calendar. If you're interested in checking out some of those events, they're all free. We invite everyone to come out, and all you need to do is go to our redrockaudubon.com and go to our calendar, and then just kind of click through the weekend days and see if something sticks out. We do a lot more, though, than just go bird watching or birding, you know, the act of going out and looking for them. This is a conservation organization. We do a lot of conservation with people in the city, but we're interested in all of the state. So we get people talking about these types of things so that they can go and join people like Friends of Nevada Wilderness and go protect whatever is important to them. And something that's really important to us in our agenda is water. We are at less than 40% capacity for Lake Mead right now, and that has happened just over the course of a few decades. Not a long time at all. Year by year, you can go to Lake Mead and see some of the changes. And we get about 90% of our water in Las Vegas and Henderson from Lake Mead, and the other 10% or so is groundwater. So we do have an interesting system here in this part of the state for actually giving credits for returning water that we pump up from Lake Mead. We actually give credits to get that water back down to Lake Mead, but still water reduction is a huge thing for us because at this rate, we're not looking good. So Red Rock Audubon's really interested in water. We want more of this on the left. When you see those big towering cumulus clouds over the Spring Mountain Range, maybe if you're a climber, you're looking at that and thinking it's time to go home or maybe not go out. But it replenishes these washes here. And those washes end up in the Las Vegas Valley. And of course, water is life here in the desert. When we're looking at 4 to 5 inches of rain or precipitation annually here, we want to make sure that we're taking advantage of every drop that we can get. So, if you're interested in staying in touch, you can email me at alexharper@redrockaudubon.com, or, and not to make an assumption about anyone's love of emails here, but if you email members at redrockaudubon.com, the person behind that loves answering emails so much. He was really eager to answer emails. So you can hit him up. We have, of course, Facebook and Instagram, Red Rock Audubon. So go ahead and give us a follow, and we'll keep you up to date with birds in the state. So I'll open it up to any questions or comments. I'm not sure how you'd like to do it with people typing in, as well as the live audience.
I've dropped a comment into the live chat and see if any roll in, but if anybody here has any questions.
How can you tell if you're seeing one of those goshawks versus something similar?
And will you do me a favor and repeat the question when you hear it so that the live people can hear it as well?
Sure. Yeah, so the question was, how can you tell that a goshawk is a goshawk versus something very similar? So to really answer that question, you got to consider hawks and falcons and just birds of prey in general. And a really good thing to do with birds, especially like birds of prey, is look at structure, look at relative size. You know, you do have some really small raptors, you have some medium-sized raptors, you have large raptors like the golden eagle and the bald eagle. Something like a goshawk, that's going to be in your larger hawk area. Habitat can be really helpful. If you're up at that elevation, you're in goshawk territory, whereas you're not really going to have that here at this elevation. You just wouldn't expect a goshawk. To really answer it, it comes down to structural and size differences that are really subtle amongst Cooper's hawks and sharp-shinned hawks. Do you want to get into that? Or?
I mean, like about what size? Are they like red-tailed hawk size?
Oh, yeah, they're red-tailed hawk size, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a really big accipiter. Mm-hmm. Anyone else in the group here?
I have one.
Did a great job then, huh? Yeah, go ahead.
How can you tell the difference between a juvenile bald eagle versus a juvenile bald eagle?
A juvenile golden eagle and a juvenile bald eagle. Okay. Another raptor question. Okay, so this was, how do you tell these two species apart? A bald eagle and a golden eagle. So we get both species here, and the golden eagle is far more common, far more widespread, especially in the sagebrush areas of the state. They love to hunt jackrabbits and cottontails, and the bald eagle is around areas that have fish. So most likely you're going to run into a golden eagle. A golden eagle is a slimmer, sleeker bird. It's more of a mountainous species. It holds its wings up, kind of high up in the air, whereas a bald eagle is more flat. The golden eagle has a smaller head and a much longer tail. It's got more tapered wings. and it's going to have clean white patch right here on the, I don't know if you can see it, but sort of the equivalent of this area on the wing. It would be a nice clean white patch. Whereas in a bald eagle, they kind of look mottled and messy, like a mottled brown and white throughout the body, whereas it's a crisp coloration difference on the golden eagle. Yeah.
So I feel like most of the birds that I see around here are small brown birds. Is there like a good way to know what type of small brown bird you see? Is it like related to the call, or just like better not to know?
So the question was, lots of brown birds here in Las Vegas. How do you tell them apart? How do you know what's different? We have a ton of birds here. Clark County alone, there have been 425 species recorded. Now, most of those birds are not expected to be seen year after year. You would really expect about 300 if you're really giving it a concerted effort. So there's a lot that you can experience here. But I would say be familiar with about 5 little birds. The white-crowned sparrow, the house finch, the verdin, house sparrow, I don't know if I mentioned that, and that's probably actually pretty good. Once you learn those 4 birds or so, and you know what to look for on them, then everything else kind of falls into place because you're looking for patterns. But we have so many different types of species here that, you know, you can walk to one bush in one park in the neighborhood and see some house finches, and then walk, you know, a couple feet and walk to a different bush, and there's another type of small brown bird. So it really takes getting into the weeds on some of those little guys. Mm-hmm.
I have a question from the live. It says, how is the phainopepla population doing in Las Vegas these days? They were declining when we moved from Las Vegas to Carson City in '93. I was in RRA for 15 years prior to moving north.
Okay, so there's a question about a species of bird called the phainopepla, and it's a type of silky flycatcher, maybe about mockingbird sized. And the question was, how are they doing? And I think what's behind that question is the status of the phainopepla and what they feed on. The primary diet in this part of the desert is mistletoe fruit, and those grow on mesquite trees. It's a parasitic plant, and so that the plant that is producing these berries that the phainopeplas are after just aren't doing well, and this is probably a function of climate change. I don't have anything off the top of my head that kind of says, like, here's a percentage drop over time, but just in general, almost every species in the Mojave Desert is declining at a pretty quick rate. It's a pretty alarming number, and the phainopepla is in there. There are places like Sunset Park that you can still find them in Las Vegas because those mesquites are still getting, I guess, a little bit of water because it's a park, and those trees are producing. So, but kind of throughout the range, not a great look for the phainopepla, unfortunately.
Okay, lots of thank yous from the chat. Lots of thank you. I learned a lot. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
That's a wrap. Cool. Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody, for your patience in the beginning and hanging out. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.